The time is now 1:30, and it's Thursday, October the 15th, and the regular meeting of the City Planning and Zoning Board will come to order. We'll begin with the preliminary matters. Any additions and deletions, Tim?
Mr. Chairman, the voluntary annexation report, the applicant has requested that be held at the second meeting in November. There may be some changes to their application. They just want to have some additional time. That's all.
Then we'll just remove that. So we'll move on to the next item. Then will be later on public comment. We'll open it for public comment then. If there's anybody in our audience who would like to speak in a general forum on anything that we're today in front of the Planning and Zoning Board, please feel free to come forward and speak now. If you're here to speak on a particular item that we'll be covering later on, you can also do it that time. There will be a public comment there also. So it's up to you. You can do either. And
actually, in a quasi-judicial situation, they need to only speak at the quasi-judicial hearing because they will need to be sworn.
Sworn in.
So on anything that isn't quasi-judicial, that's fine.
Okay. Did you understand that? Or okay. We'll move the next thing. Let's see. I'm opening public comment. Seeing nobody coming forward, I will immediately close public comment. And the item 3 on our agenda has been removed, so we'll move on to item 4, a public hearing. And the first one is A. And it's quasi-judicial, therefore the case title will be a variance application submitted by Paul Parent to allow the placement of a generator at the required setback of 8 Dolphin Drive, number V1500007. The chairman, disclosure by Planning and Zoning Board members. Any ex parte communications?
No.
Swearing in. Anybody
if
who'd
you're
like
going to testify, if you'll stand and raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Any exhibits, please get them to the council. Staff are going to have opening statements, and you going to handle it? You, okay.
Yes. This is a requested variance from section 61.08B, which is for accessory equipment, is allowed to encroach 3.5 feet into a required yard, and the applicant is requesting an additional encroachment of 6.5 feet into the side west yard of the property. And this is in the R1A zoning district, and it's an existing single-family house that was constructed in 1963. And earlier this year, January, there was an application submitted for an addition to this home. And at that time, a generator was approved, which met the setback requirements. It was 13 feet from the side yard. And later this year, July of 2015, another application was submitted for the generator, which met the setback requirements of 11.5 feet. Subsequently, the applicant submitted this application for the variance to have it 5 feet from the side yard property line. And in order to grant a variance, the applicant must satisfy all of the criteria of section 66.02, the general review criteria, and section 66.03, the specific review criteria. And in reviewing the staff report and hearing the testimony of the applicant, staff, and public, the Planning and Zoning Board should consider the following principles regarding variances based on case law and the city code. A variance is only authorized if due to the circumstances unique to the applicant's property itself and not shared by other property in the area. A variance is only authorized if it is created by undue and unnecessary hardship caused by the zoning regulation. And a variance hardship cannot be self-created. It must be the land, not the nature of the project, which must be unique and create the hardship. The mere preference of what a property owner wants to do with a property does not constitute a hardship, entitling the owner to a variance. And we had attached Chapter 66 for your reference for variances. And with Section 66.02, the Planning and Zoning Board shall deny an application if it finds that the approval would. And we have a list A through G in the memo, and staff finds that the proposed variance would not cause a hardship of any of the above conditions. And in regards to Section 66.03 is the specific review criteria that the applicant must demonstrate in order for the Planning and Zoning Board to grant a variance. And it should be noted that all of the criteria must be met in order for the variance to be granted. And the first required finding is that the application of the zoning ordinance causes an exceptional and unique hardship. And the applicant's response is that the elevation, as well as the allowed 11.5 required setback by the city planning department, will create an eyesore to the neighbor at 10 Dolphin Drive, as well as to anyone who uses the waterway or park that is exposed for all to view. And staff's analysis states that the code requires the 11.5 feet side yard requirement for accessory equipment, both for aesthetic reasons and because of to shield the adjacent properties from noise. Generators require regular routine maintenance, and if the generators are too close to adjacent properties, we're afraid that it would cause disturbance with peace and quiet of a neighborhood. And the argument that the variance is needed to avoid a potential eyesore does not really create a unique hardship because screening is available for the generator at the approved location. And the fact that the generator can be placed on the property in a location that meets the setback requirements clearly demonstrates that the subject does not meet the test of an exceptional and unique hardship. Just because the property owner wants to do something on his property that is inconsistent with the setback regulations does not constitute a hardship, entitling the applicant to a variance. And the second required finding is that the exceptional and unique hardship is not due solely to the owner's action. And the applicant's response is that if they place the proposed generator at the allowed setback and maintain the 6-foot elevation, it will directly affect the value of 10 Dolphin Drive as well as other property owners in Vero Isles. And in the staff's analysis, as noted above, it doesn't indicate that the applicant has showed that there's a unique and exceptional hardship. The hardship is solely based on the applicant's desire to place the generator within the required setback. Other property owners are required to meet the same setbacks for generators and mechanical equipment. As demonstrated with the previously approved locations for this generator, the request for the hardship is created solely by the owner's actions and preferences. And with the third required finding that the variance granted will be compatible with the physical characteristics of the neighborhood. And the applicant's response is there are other generator installations in Vero Isles that allow the generator to fit into the 15-foot setback and out of the backyard view of all property owners. And the staff's analysis is that the code allows generators to encroach 3.5 feet into the required yard. Granting a variance to allow further encroachment into a setback for the specific property would create a non-conforming setback for the generator and would not be compatible with the regulations of the R1A zoning district, and it would be a violation of the code. And the fourth required finding is that the variance granted will be in harmony with the intent and purpose of the code. And the applicant states that the variance will allow all necessary clear space and would meet the requirements of the building code. Our analysis is that the approval of the requested variance would create a non-conforming encroachment into the side yard setback for the proposed generator, especially as the hardship is solely based on the actions of the owner. The approved location, the previously approved locations of the proposed generator also provides all the necessary clear space and requirements of the building code. And granting a variance just to meet the preferences of the applicant does not meet the intent and purposes of the code and would provide a benefit to this property owner not shared by other property owners in the neighborhood. And the fifth required finding is that the variance granted is the minimum necessary in order to alleviate the exceptional and unique hardship. The applicant's response is that if granted, this will allow all concerned the best used locations as a solution to this unusual situation. And in the staff's analysis, we just stated that, as noted above, the staff has previously approved 2 other locations for the generator that met the setback requirements, and that this proposed variance is not an exceptional and unique hardship as documented above. The applicant has not shown that the zoning or configuration of the land is creating an undue hardship. Therefore, the requested variance fails to meet the criterion that the variance requested is the minimum necessary in order to alleviate the exceptional and unique hardship. And staff has reviewed the request for the variance from the provisions of section 61.08B, and we find that it does not meet all of the standards of review set forth in Code Section 66.03, based on the analysis and findings above, and staff is recommending denial of the variance based on the findings above, that the requested application does not meet all the review criteria of Section 66.03, the code.
You going to call any witnesses?
No.
Okay. Any questions of?
I have none at this time.
No.
No.
No question.
How about you?
I do, but I'll delay them.
The applicant like to come forward and make your presentation? Please state your name.
Yes, my name is Paul Parent. My wife and I are the owners of 8 Dolphin Drive and the Vero House. I've been a member of this community since 1956. Grew up here. I have a great deal of pride in the city and what it really represents, and the fact that we're supposed to protect the environment and also make it available so that we try to keep it as beautiful, which is one of the big features that Vero Beach prides itself in. My concern here is mostly for my next door neighbor. When I first went in to visit Gail and the planning staff, I asked her about getting a variance, and she went and checked, and she said no, that wasn't going to be possible. And I went ahead and proceeded then to get a building permit to put the generator back in the location that shows. I guess you can't see it from your spot.
We have a screen. If you can point to it.
Okay. Well, anyway, back about 28 feet from the seawall. And the seawall in this particular location is a little over 1 foot above sea level. The generator pad to the concrete has to be at 6 foot above sea level, which puts the pad about 30 inches above the ground. And then the generator sits on top of this pad another 45 inches. So it sits up in the air quite a bit. And it's the only location on the lot that I can put the generator in. And the generator has to be open on the back side because that's how it ventilates itself. You can't have anything in front of it because it discharges the heat to that. So you can't screen it from there. So I went ahead and acquired a building permit to put it there, hired David Jones, the surveyor, to go out and spot it, and then give me the elevations as to the top of the slab. And I supplied some pictures to the staff. I'm not sure, did you all go out and see this, the site at all? Did you go out and verify that there were no other generators in setbacks?
I looked at the properties that you had supplied the pictures, and interestingly enough, 2 out of the 4 that you had provided us with had come through the city for the zoning review, and they do meet the setback requirements, and there are 2 other properties that there was no city review for the generators that look like they're questionable with the setbacks, which we'll have code enforcement look into.
Right. In submitting those, Gail, the purpose of it was either they don't meet the setbacks or they don't meet the code, because you have to be with a generator so many feet off the building. Those other 2 don't meet the building code. So we're trying to meet the building code, which is regulated by the elevation of the pad, and putting the generator on top, sticking it in the only location that's available to me. And I can live with it. It's not going to be a huge inconvenience to me, because in fact I can plant in front of it, but unfortunately my neighbor to the west of me, her property values are going to be severely decreased only because I'm required to put the generator here, and there's no place else for me to put it. She, in fact, I've spoken to, and she would like to have you all consider the granting the variance, and I'm doing this mostly for her, not for me. It's not any hardship to Paul or Mary Parent to stick the generator back there. Is it going to look better if it weren't there? Yes, it would. But I'm stuck putting it there. I haven't done anything with it right now. I went ahead and staked it out. I know where the location has to be. I know the elevation, and I know that it's going to be an eyesore for, not only my neighbor, but anybody driving it through the park is going to look across it. It is an unusual piece of property, those 4 or 5 lots, because you can see them. And if that's what the city believes is not an eyesore, I don't know what is. So I'm not pleading hardship. I'm pleading the fact that this is affecting not only me to a degree, but mostly my neighbor. If there's any other questions, I'll be glad to answer.
You going to present any witnesses?
John? Yeah, I guess Mr. Campione is here.
You can please come forward, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Good afternoon. My name is John Campione, law firm of Campione and Leonard. We represent the estate of Albert Burbank, who is the neighboring property owner at 10 Dolphin Drive. And we're in favor. Our client is in favor of the variance and has no objection to the variance of placing the generator on the side of the house. And that's why we're here. She asked us to be here to voice our approval of it. So we believe, in her opinion and our opinion, that it's in conformity with other generators in the neighborhood that are placed on the sides of residences. And again, we're in favor of the variance, and that's why.
So you're representing her?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We okay with that? Okay. What is her biggest objection then? The appearance, that it's blocking her view?
I think it's the appearance of blocking her view, this proximity to the water, the views to the water. None of them, others in the neighborhood, conformity-wise, being situated in spots like this, and just feels it would be less obtrusive and more hidden on the side of the residence.
Okay.
Particularly with her view, or a line of view going from her property and her lot down the side towards the water.
I understand. Questions?
I have a question of Mr. Parent, if that would be okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Parent, I have a question, please.
Yes.
It talked about noise in our backup material here. What's the noise level of the generator that you're putting in?
I don't have the exact...
Just a guesstimate.
It meets the requirement in the county. I didn't check what the city's requirement is.
Have you run the generator?
No, I haven't purchased the generator. I've
Okay.
just purchased the transfer switch that goes on the side of the building.
The type of generator that you're putting in, have you heard one run like the one you're going to put in?
Yes, we had one in our prior home at 502 Bay Drive.
In your opinion, how much noise does it make?
When it came on, you couldn't actually even hear it if you're inside the house.
What about when you're outside?
It's no more so than a lawnmower.
Okay.
I mean a riding lawnmower. I don't mean a little
I understand.
lawnmower.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Other questions? If not, Is the
That was approved.
evidence from the public, witnesses from the public come forward now, is that right? Anybody who would like to speak on this issue, you're welcome to come forward now to the podium if you've been sworn in. Seeing nobody else coming forward, I will move on to closing arguments by the applicant.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. What about the introduction of this letter
I guess we should
into
introduce
evidence?
It was mentioned, but we officially have that letter. Do you
Mr.
have it?
Campione, is this your client, Mrs. Catherine Burbank at 10 Dolphin Drive? Okay. Her counsel was here to represent her, so he spoke on behalf of her. This is her letter.
Okay. So we don't officially have to enter it in. Okay. All right.
Unless Mr. Campione would like to do that.
You can enter. I have no objection to entering it in there.
All right. Closing arguments by Gail.
I thought I already did, but
Well,
I'm following procedure.
I'll do the closing arguments. All right. The first thing is that pointed out, whether it's a visual eyesore or not has nothing to do with the hardship. That's not in the code. Nor whether the next door neighbor is in favor of it or not. You cannot negotiate the code. That was set by the city council. If you want to change the code, you need to go through the change in the code. Variances are supposed to be stringent because it's an item established by policy of your governing body, not for people like me or governing regulatory bodies to just change it willy-nilly. That's why it's so strict. In this case, we've already shown that the applicants had two locations. In fact, there's a location that was closer to his house that may have not affected or been such an eyesore for a next-door neighbor, but the applicant, and what Gail has said, didn't like that location because it was too close to some portion of his house. The question about property values, I haven't seen an expert provide any evidence on property values, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. And again, the applicant wants to have a generator. That's not necessarily something, they want a generator, fine, but that's their preference. We have codes that do it. We also allow a modified setback for these. Whether that setback is good enough, as I said again, that's for the city council to process to make a decision, not for to willy-nilly make changes because somebody doesn't like a location or the next door neighbor. The next door neighbor may not be there forever. You may have another neighbor come in. That's why we have codes that go through public hearings. You look at these situations. So again, the staff believes that the evidence provided before you in the facts, and even pointed out by the applicant, that it's not a hardship, is basically doesn't meet the criteria. Therefore, we're recommending denial.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I can't see, when this was originally approved with the in the rear yard, which is what it looks like here next, what is the setback from the canal wall? I couldn't see that.
Should be at least 25 feet.
yeah,
So that met that setback
Yes.
requirement. Okay.
Could I ask another question?
Sure.
What are the other locations that the city had approved?
If you look where the proposed generator is shown on the
Right.
site plan, if you come back to the building where there's the little, there's a fireplace jutting out, it was right in that area, and it had a 13-foot side yard setback at that location.
From the side. And now this one shows.
It's got an 11 and a half feet, which is what is required.
Okay.
That's the one location.
There were actually two.
Both in the same area?
The first one was approved. It was towards the house itself. It was, if you look on the west, there's a little jut out where the fireplace is located, and it was right in that area. And when it was shown there, it had a 13-foot side yard setback.
Did the neighbor object to that one?
We didn't receive any complaints about that one, any of that proposed location.
Additional questions, Gail?
I have none. I have none.
Paul,
Yeah,
you're allowed to cross-examination.
Sure. We'd love to be able to put it there. The only problem is it doesn't meet the building code. You have to be 5 feet away from combustible materials, and they measure it from, in this case, the overhang down to the generator. That throws it back to where we're at right now, and you have to be at least 3 feet off the wall. Doesn't meet that either. It throws you back in there. So what are the locations, again, that you can find?
Well, the location that was originally approved was in the January site plan, which was close to the where the fireplace is shown, and then the other location is what is shown on there now.
So the two locations are where it's shown right now and where we can't do it because of the building code.
Are you saying that the other one that she talked about near the
Yes, it
fireplace?
doesn't meet the building code.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So there is no other location. There's this location or no location.
Well,
if we could get the building code changed so that we can set it up.
You got a better chance.
I would rather have it there, and I'm sure my neighbor would love to have it there too. I'm all for that.
Yeah, I think one thing, so you understand, we don't look at the building code, so we adopt it, and there may be cases where you can have it closer because it really depends on a lot of other factors that only the building
It depends on the
department.
generator itself.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And,
So this generator requires 3 feet off of the building, requires 5 feet off of any combustible material, and they count any, meaning fascia or anything else. And to do that moved us again outside the setback line. In order to meet everything that the planning wanted, the only place to put it was where it shows right now. And once I actually staked it through David Jones, and he gave me the elevations, and if it could have been built on grade, we would have been. It would have been easier.
well, you're in a floodplain, right? That's
right.
why they.
So we have to be at 6.
Yeah.
The seawall's at 1. So it's essentially 5 feet above the seawall just to the concrete pad. And then you're going to put the generator on top of that. So this thing, it's a very unusual situation that does affect me, but really affects my neighbor. And she's the lady I'm concerned about.
Did you have a choice in the kind of generator you could put in?
They're all about the same size.
They would all have the same.
Yes, ma'am. What they do, we send it off to the engineers. The engineers tell us how big. Now, whether or not it's a Kohler or a Generac, they tell you the capacity and all the boxes might vary by inches, but not by feet. The real problem is the elevation of the concrete pad. That's where the issue was.
I have a question. Why did you rule out the east side? Because
there's no room there either. It's 15 feet over there as well.
Okay, I can't see that.
Yeah, the numbers are so small we can't actually read that, but on our drawing. But there's no room on the east side then.
No,
there.
it's the same as on the west side.
What's the width of the lot? It's 119?
The 114 by 125.
That's why.
It's in that.
It's in that little bit.
And had we knocked the house down, I guess all that could have been given consideration. But in order to put this is not a huge home. It's about 3,000 square feet of living area with a 2-car garage. I could have built a 2-story house there with a 3-car garage, which is kind of what we would have liked to have had space-wise. But my parents used to live at 10 Dolphin, so it meant something to me to maintain the neighborhood. And that's what I've tried to do. I've tried to show that you can improve the homes that are there, that meet the flood elevation, and still maintain the character of the neighborhood. And I think we've been successful in that. And I'll say, I am not the one who would be injured here. I'm affected by it, yes. The people who drive through that park and use the waterways, they're going to look at it and say, what were they thinking? I want to be able to tell anybody in my own mind, I did everything I could. And that's why I'm here. Any other question?
Paul, was that your closing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Let's double it up for that.
All right. Any additional questions of Paul?
I have none.
Thank you, Paul. Any rebuttal, Tim?
Well, no, I think he pointed out why he couldn't do it at one location, and that's the facts. But again, being an eyesore and all that doesn't come in the code here. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can, if that were the case, people could be proposing all sorts of things to get code changes. And I'm sorry, that's the way the code is. Nobody says he has to have a generator. I mean, he's decided he wants a generator. He's making that decision, and the code just doesn't fit into what he wants. If again, if you want to get what he wants, you need to do a code change. or to give some flexibility in these kind of situations that the planning director or you all could make some changes that would allow this, and we just don't have that in the code, and therefore it doesn't meet the criteria that, as I said, the criteria are very stringent, and they're intended to be that way.
I think we're going to see more and more of this coming forward as the houses are revitalized or, new houses
Absolutely.
are going up.
That's the problem.
It's just scary to see a 5-foot, within the 5-foot setback. I mean, a lot of people are going to look at that and say, whoa,
And that's
it goes
one-
both
right.
ways. Yeah.
I mean, certainly if you want us to look into this more, that could be something, on a code change for that. But again, it's a hearing process that you go through to get input, because there are a lot of things that can occur,
Maybe at some point in the near future, Vero Isle should be getting together and discussing maybe an overlay district for these kinds of things to give some kind of guidance to what can be done.
Or not
This isn't the first time this kind of thing is coming forward. Yeah.
Or not necessarily an overlay, but maybe just some modifications or some exceptions we can put into the
Or
code.
to the area specifically. Yeah.
I think since we're on the subject, obviously, as Ms. Manous has pointed out, this is going to come up again probably in the near future. I think what I'm hearing is a recommendation should go forward. They need to take a look at the code and let Mr. McGarry's department do that, where there could be some wiggle room with this. Mr. Parham pointed out, according to the building code, the level of the platform, the concrete platform, has to be so many feet above the level, and that's pretty high. So that's pretty clear. So there needs to be some wiggle room. So when these others come in, are we going to have these tall generators on platforms all over the neighborhood? Because more people may want to put them in. I also understand what Mr. McGarry is saying. Right now in front of us, the code is the code. It's pretty clear, and we can't make a determination to change the code. That's not our job. But we can make recommendations going forward that this needs to be looked into, and not later, a few years down the road. It needs to be done here as soon as his department can.
I don't know how to exactly say this, but one of the comments that I heard was in harmony with the intent of the code. And the intent of the code, and this is pretty broadly speaking now, is to help our communities and our neighborhoods be more harmonious with each other and to stop things that would be harmful to the rest of the neighborhood and make it so it's better than it would have been otherwise without the code being in effect. I think this is a time where the code is out of step with the needs of the neighborhood. And I know that as a board member here, my vote should be against this, but my practical person in the real life says this is a mistake. This will be the second time I think I've had this as a mistake, because the last time I voted for practicality also. And I don't know how to vote for something in my heart I feel is not the right decision. And I think I can rationalize any part of that decision I want to say that I'm doing the right thing for the neighborhood, for the neighbors, and for the intent of the code. When the code doesn't fit, that's why they have boards to come to, I think, to say it doesn't apply here, we should make an exception. I'm probably going to hear a lot from my planning chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to say the harmony thing, you can make that kind of interpretation. But remember, it has to meet all the criteria. It doesn't meet all the criteria.
I can interpret that as I see interpret, just like a judge does. The same judge rules differently in every case that comes before him. Therefore, if it comes before me, I can make my decision how I interpreted what I read.
It sounds like you've
saw.
had some experience.
No, I haven't. We'll open it up for discussion, continued discussion among board members. I'd like to hear from the rest of you to get a consensus.
Well, I'll speak to the issue.
Okay.
I agree with staff. I think it's pretty clear that the code does not permit this this improvement, and it's the applicant's choice as to whether such an improvement even be applied for. It's not necessary that, except for their best interest, that they have a generator. the site that's approved can be screened and landscaped. And I'm not in a position to approve the variance.
Additional comments?
I can't find a way to justify this. The required findings just aren't there. Does it cause an exceptional and unique hardship? It's not necessarily for the applicant, but we're also considering the neighbor. That neighbor's property at some point may be, they may be looking at, looking closer to their setbacks also to redevelop or remodel. It's just if you make one exception somewhere, I know it doesn't set a standard, but I can't, every single one of these for the required findings, I've been going over my paperwork's marked up like mad. Is it a unique and exceptional hardship? I was concerned over the pictures that had been part of this packet, and thank you for explaining that, because some of them look like, that's easily 15 feet, and the others go, whoa, that's very close. So thank you for your explanation. But is it compatible with the physical characteristics of the neighborhood? Mostly, they have the setbacks set. I live in the neighborhood, and we live very privately with each other. It's as good neighbors, and I'm glad to see this communication with the neighbors, and I think what Mr. Parent is doing is admirable. But as far as, we can't be an activist board. We have to be, this is the law, and this is what we have to follow. And that's why I'm suggesting at some point the community needs to come together and see if they want to, change their setbacks. The canals are very valuable assets to that community, and a lot of people want to build right up to the canal. Do they want to allow it or not? The community needs to open that discussion. But as far as the law is, I can't make an excuse, to allow this to happen. Okay.
Any further discussion?
I have nothing else to say.
I do have one other item to mention, and that is that I might suggest, I don't believe the vote's going to be favorable. That's my impression, and I'm going to make an suggestion out loud, is that we, Mr. Parent might consider waiting on this for a little bit of time, because the season's almost over for the necessity of this generator, possibly, and there may be some facility that happens subsequent to this that if you could hold off on it, you might find that you get some remediation from the code. I can't assure you that or even promise you that, but as much as I want to vote favorably, I don't believe the vote's going to go the way you want it to. So are we ready to call a question?
I'll say this, I'm in agreement with the chair on the statement that you just made. This does need to be looked into, and the neighborhood does have to come together. And Ms. Manus is correct in what she's saying. We're not here to change the code. She used a good example. Are you going to allow building right up onto the edge of the canal? So that's something that we have to consider. Staff made its point, why they didn't agree to it. They also, one of the staff members, they talked about, I think there's 2 other areas in the neighborhood where it's questionable where the generators are at now. And that's going to be looked into. So let's say, for the sake of argument, those 2 other generators that are in question are found to be doing an encroachment. Well, it's going to be right back here for a variance. So you need to keep that in the back of your mind. I do hope staff will go forward and see if there's areas that we can tweak this out to take a look at what Mr. Parent was talking about, the height. What else could be done to make this work? You heard what the building code is. They have to go by that. And I am in agreement with Mr. Lahr for the vote. I'm not hearing the votes here to accommodate Mr. Parent at this time.
I'd like to call for the question.
We'll need a motion.
Yeah.
Motion?
There's not
I'm
a
sorry,
motion.
let's hear a motion, please. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we support staff's denial.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
We have a first and a second. Let's call the question.
Mr. Degg?
Yes, the motion to deny according to what staff reported on.
Mr. Cahoy?
Yes.
Ms. Polensky?
Yes.
Mrs. Manous?
Yes.
Mr. Lawfer?
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we'll try to look into this. I mean, we're,
Okay.
well, it really mostly affects the Vero Isles neighborhood because of the
It does.
floodplain issues.
Yeah.
Even though maybe on the main, not the mainland, Vero Island we may have that, but we've not had that issue come up, so it is a little different.
The next item to come before us is also quasi-judicial, and item B, and I will read that now. An ordinance of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, requested by Camp Haven, Inc., amending the official zoning map by changing the zoning district designation of C1B General Commercial Trades and Services to C1 Highway-Oriented Commercial for property located at 3256 US 1 containing 0.95 of an acre more or less, providing for an effective date. And is there any disclosure by the Planning and Zoning Board members of ex parte communications?
No.
Hearing none, moving in. Would you like to swear in?
Yes. If anyone is going to testify, if you're standing, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Any exhibits, please bring them forward to the court clerk. She could be the court, though, too, I guess, knowing her. Staff's going to make an opening presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, board members. As Mr. Chairman mentioned, this is a request to rezone property from existing commercial C1B to another commercial district C-1. And given that that's the case in this circumstance, the staff put together a comparison of the two different zoning districts and the permitted uses in those zoning districts. And we've provided that for you in your staff report, and I'll just summarize that very, very briefly for you all. The existing zoning is C-1B, and that district allows two uses that are not permitted in the proposed C1 zoning district, and those two uses are daycare services and cultural and civic activities. The proposed C-1 commercial zoning district allows an additional 6 uses that are not permitted in the current C1B zoning district. And I'll list those for you. Adult congregate living facility, commercial amusements, guest house and transient quarters, hotel and motels, nursing or convalescent home, and vehicle sales and services. So those are the differences in the permitted uses for the two zoning districts. And basically, in summary, the two districts are similar with the provision that the C-1, the proposed zoning district, allows those additional uses. So with that, the staff reviewed the proposed rezoning map amendment based on the standards that are in our land development regulations. And one of the first standards that the code requires us to do is to look for the justification for the amendment. And the applicant has provided that to us, and also all the justification and answers to the questions that are part of the submitted zoning map application that's in your packet. Going back to the justification for the amendment, the staff does agree and concurs with the applicant that the amendment is warranted and justified to allow the existing grandfathered motel use and potential expansion of the existing property to be brought into compliance with code requirements. Currently, the use there is a motel. The existing building was a motel, and it was built back in the 1940s. And currently, it's a legal non-conforming use there, meaning it's been there, it's legal. However, as we noted earlier, the hotel motels are not permitted use in the existing zoning district. So with this proposed change in zoning district would bring that into conformance from the use standpoint. And it would also allow the current property owner to expand that use if so desired. So that justification, the staff finds, we concur with that. Several other requirements for our review we consider when an application for rezoning is submitted to us, one of which is the consistency with the comprehensive plan. And as we noted in our report, the proposed C1 commercial zoning district is compatible with the existing land use, which in this case is mixed MX. So that standard is met. The next standard that the staff looked into as pertains to the code requirements is it consistent with the land development regulations and the zoning standards and criteria? And the proposed C1 zoning district, and as well as all the zoning districts in the purpose statement of our land development regulations, it states that these districts are designed to provide adequate space in appropriately highly accessible locations. And as noted, this property, the subject rezoning is along US 1, which is a highly accessible location along a major arterial, and is suitable to accommodate the existing uses and the new proposed uses. An additional review requirement that the staff looked at is the proposed rezoning consistent with the immediate vicinity of the subject property, and is it compatible with the other changes in the other zoning districts? And as you'll note on the map was provided in your packet, along that area of US 1, you have to the north commercial property, commercial zoning, and to the south and to the west you have some industrial zoning, and to the east of the subject property you have some RM residential multifamily 1012 zoning district. Basically, the commercial pattern is already exists in this area and along US 1, and so the proposed change would be consistent with that existing development pattern, including the RM10 zoning district, which abuts the property to the east. It's along the commercial corridor already. It already exists. And the staff did look at, since it is a relatively small piece of property, a little less than an acre, we did look at the question maybe it would be considered spot zoning, and we provided a brief discussion of that in our packet. The staff feels that would not be spot zoning, basically because the commercial development pattern already exists in that area and in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. Another condition that criteria that we look at is the changed conditions to the property, the neighborhood, or the area in the vicinity where the amendment is warranted. And as we explained earlier, the justification for the amendment, basically it's a non-conforming use as it is today, the motel, and the potential expansion of the property. It brings it into compliance, and it allows for potential expansion. And so based on that finding, the staff finds that the C1 proposed zoning is warranted, and it's also, like I mentioned earlier, the area is already commercially zoned and developed. In terms of the maintenance of level of service, the staff looked at that as well, and since the uses are very similar, the staff finds that there would be no significant impact in the proposed change, including the traffic impacts. So that really wasn't an issue, and the staff concurs that the zoning rezoning would not have any adverse impacts on the level of service standards. And the last but not least, the consistency and the harmony. Once again, we've addressed that previous comments, but the rezoning is compatible with the area since it's already commercially developed and it's in harmony with the area. That summarizes pretty much our staff report and our findings. And based on that and our report that's in your packet, the staff recommends that you all recommend to the City Council approval of the ordinance that would amend the official zoning map to change the zoning from C1B to C1 commercial. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have her. Okay, go ahead, Ken.
Go ahead, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Camp Haven, just so it's clear in my mind, they're requesting the rezoning. Got that. Does the area that they're doing their work now, where they have the folks stay, is this what they're asking to have rezoned, or is this another piece of property within the vicinity?
It's the former. It's their existing property. They're not asking for any additions.
And that's the property now is in operation, correct?
That's correct.
With folks there.
I'm the one that made the determination they are a non-conforming motel to get in there. I believe, unless they've changed minds, they wanted to expand to have kitchen facilities too in there, which we wouldn't let them do because that would have been an expansion of a non-conforming use. So I think that's one of the things, other than a few other improvements they want to make to the property. They're really kind of held by by being a non-conforming.
Tim, if we talk about expansion, if they were to want to add additional rooms or building, then they would have to meet all the current criteria. Is that right?
That's correct.
Deceleration lane, stormwater,
Yeah, they're kind of limited right now. If they become a conforming use, yes, they would have to definitely meet all.
So these improvements, then, I think, would be more consistent with upgrading and adding things internally, not necessarily creating a physical space.
Well, you can talk to the applicant. I mean, not that that's germane to this.
It isn't really.
I mean, that's just information, but it's not germane to your decision.
In general, though, that's what they would be allowed to do without going back.
Yes.
Okay. So if this property right now is it's in compliance, but it's really an exception in a way. So now they would be in compliance. So if they sold this property to somebody else, they could continue with this operation. Is that correct?
Or change it to another use.
Or change to that's consistent with the new zoning.
Correct.
Okay.
That kind of concurs with some of the questions I had, because on page 5, you indicate that the current property owner has indicated their interest in expanding the uses within its existing development. And I started thinking about, well, is that going to impact, like, for instance, traffic?
Right.
Do we need to do more traffic counts?
Well, remember, they have to go through a site plan process. So when they go for development review, that's when we hit them. The other thing I want to point out is and I talked to them initially, it goes back a few years, it's taken a while, was that the staff would favor rezoning all those properties in that area, because we're even looking at, there's question about redeveloping all that are in that property back there. There's a lot of issues back in there.
Right.
And but for them to try to get every property owner to come in, it would have really held them up.
It's urban renewal
kind
of thing.
Yeah.
So, in other words, what they're intending to do is completely covered within the C1B.
No, the C1.
The C1. I'm sorry,
yes, what
C1.
they're requesting. Yes.
Right.
And the property now is significantly better than it was prior to this. I mean, it's actually one of the better properties along that area right now.
Absolutely.
And any additional questions of Sherry? Sure.
And the use going forward, if approved, they can do right now the adult living there as it stands, correct?
No, sir, they can't. It's not an allowed use in the existing C1B zoning district. Remember, you're looking at rezoning and allowing all those other potential uses, subject to obviously an approved site plan or anything that would come
clearly with the kitchen and everything, my understanding, they would move more to an ACLF designation than they would as a motel.
Okay. Describe that. You just used an acronym.
ACLF.
Oh, adult congregate living
ACLF.
Okay. To newbies.
All right. And if approved under the C1, that can take place there. My other question is, I understand the adult congregate living facility. What about a treatment facility where they dispense drugs?
Good question.
Oh, let's see.
Is that part of the
License?
criteria?
That would be
Moving
that would be, they're only approved for what they have. They'd have to get our approval for that, but as I said, that we have other issues that come into that. But certainly they would have to have we would look at a
Licensing.
license and all that. So that's a different issue. We have that every zoning district, as you well know, Mr. Daig. So you've got one in your neighborhood.
I'm not bringing my neighborhood into this. I'm just wanted to know, as I'm sure you've been following the papers.
Yes.
For other things coming down the pike, this is things that cities will need to address with these treatment facilities and what goes on there. That's why I wanted that on the record. If I don't see it there, but I wanted to make sure. Okay.
Well, that's
Additional
not a
question?
separate use,
That's right.
right? Okay.
Any additional questions, Sherry or Tim? If the applicant would like to come forward now to make your presentation. Please give us your name, and you were sworn in, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Clint Rogers. I'm with Carter Associates, and I'm representing Camp Haven in this application. And really, I think the staff did a very good job of describing what this project is, and we feel that it's a necessary change for the plans of Camp Haven to move forward. And as they mentioned before, the expansion plans is what they're looking at right now is all staying within the same footprint of the current buildings. It's internal changes, not any new buildings at this time. If anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Questions?
I think this makes sense. Glad you caught it.
Okay, Roger.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I have a question and or comment. This development occurred back in the 1940s, and that was before US 1 was expanded to what it is now. So I'm assuming that right-of-way took part of that property over the years to reduce its footprint, and I'm curious as to whether you know if the long-range redevelopment plans do include any additional buildings.
As far as I understand, they do not at this point.
All right. My concern about that area and that particular enterprise is traffic and safety, ingress and egress, and I understand that and Tim has already said that if there are any new plans that come forward, all of that will be dealt with. But I just wanted on the record that that is a concern that I have.
In addition to that, to make this point, when we did the analysis for this, we looked at the most intense possible use of that property. We didn't look at what our property is right now, which is significantly less than the most intense use. And conveniently enough, the most intense use within C1 is the same as the most intense use in C1B. So whether the change is made or not, the traffic could be just as big in C1B, which is currently zoned, as it is in C1.
Thank you.
I have a question for the engineer. Sure. Mr. Chair. The site as it sits now, if you were to expand, let's say you went up, what is the most that you can do on that property? Complete build out. How high can you go on that property?
Well, the city has a 35-foot ceiling, so you couldn't go above that. But it'd all still be subject to what your floor area ratios are. And that would be, decided the same way in either of the two zoning criteria. I couldn't tell you exactly off the top of my head how many square feet they could go, but we would have to follow the general zoning criteria regardless.
Okay, and that answers my questions. I have a question. Thank you, sir. I have a question from Mr. McGarry. In this zoning, what's the highest you can go? Is that correct, 35?
It's 35, and then the 15 for embellishments. So 35 plus 15.
Plus 15, total of 50.
Right.
Total of 50.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
Thank you.
No additional questions? Thank you, Roger. Is anybody from the public would like to speak now? Testimony from the public? Seeing nobody coming forward, we'll move on. Closing arguments by the applicant. Share anything additional to say?
No, sir, we don't. Thank you.
Anything additional, Roger? Okay. Discussion by the board?
I think it's a good move.
Yes.
I think it's a real good move for that particular
I
section.
don't have any real objections either. I think it's positive, actually.
I think
This is
so,
a
too.
very positive
Then we need a-
situation. Well needed. Good location.
And we appreciate what's happening there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I need a motion then.
Okay, I'll move that we accept staff's recommendation.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Do you want to call the question?
Mr. Dagg,
Yes, I agree with staff's recommendation.
Mr. Cahoy,
Yes.
Ms. Polensky,
Yes.
Mrs. Manous,
Yes,
Mr. Loffer.
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Good luck. The next legislative.
We finally have a legislative.
Yeah, finally get legislative. Okay.
All words.
Tim will probably throw a wrench in this one somehow, I think. This is an ordinance of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 62, Article 3, C1A, C1B, B1, and C1 commercial districts, and Article X downtown district of Part 3 land development regulations in the Code of the City of Vero Beach to provide government use as a permitted use, providing for codification, providing for conflict and severability, providing for an effective date. Tim, you're on.